We are rolling live from the Young Israel of Scarsdale, broadcasting around the world. Literally, I think there are people in Israel who are not watching live, but they'll watch later. So welcome those of you who are joining in person. Hey, Bonnie, how are you? I'll pass this down to Bonnie and to Sandra. Okay, what a nice crowd in person here today.
Yeah.
Okay, very nice. Oh, we're not even done. We're not even done adding to the table. Here, they retracted the tables, because it was getting okay, very nice. I have a spot for you next to the teacher. So you have the students you keep an eye. So you keep the students you keep an eye on. Exactly. Okay.
Yeah, that's fine.
All right.
Good idea, Meryl. Yeah.
Very nice. Good to be back with everybody. We begin by acknowledging it's obviously Yom HaZikaron at this point. You notice the flag was outside was already half-mast, and so we'll dedicate our learning tonight to the memory of those who've fallen in service of defending the state of Israel, and those who've whose lives have been cut short from terror attacks in Israel. So we remember them now. We learn in their memory, and hopefully in doing so, we elevate their neshamot. We're going to study tonight. I picked apropos to the time of the year. Oh, by the way, how very fitting that you can't. I guess in the camera you can see it's been live. That there's a Israeli flag over my shoulder the whole class tonight. So thank you to Claudia for the water and the refreshments, and a happy belated birthday yesterday. Hopefully she enjoyed the cake. So it's not lost on me that obviously it's Yom Ha'atzmaut that we're celebrating tomorrow night, and what an important day that is on the calendar for us. It's of great significance, and so I felt very much moved to discuss the psalm we're going to study tonight, which is Kuf. Kuf. No, I'm okay. Thank you so much, Claudia. Appreciate it. Thank you. So I could charge my computer. Not run out of battery. Thank you. Okay. So when the state of Israel was founded, we're all, I think, very well aware at this point that they have they chose an anthem. You know it very well, Hatikva. What are the roots and the origins of Hatikva?
Russian song, maybe.
What was that? It was of the Zionist movement that predated the state of Israel. This was their anthem, essentially. There were some words that are changed. The words are different. I remember hearing it for the first time. And there was there's a few word changes. So I remember hearing it the first time. First time I remember hearing the original version. I hope I'm not getting this wrong. That's for a clean recorder, but my recollection. I think I was in Yad Vashem the first time, and I feel like I remember the video screen, and and I don't recall who was singing it, but there were some children that were singing it, and that was the first time I remember hearing it, and I realized, oh, the words are different. Not that different. There was like a few word changes. So this is the origin story, and there's someone who wrote it. I don't even recall at this point the name. I'm sure if you look on Google, person who wrote it. I'm hearing some story. I don't know if it's an apocryphal story that the person had some alcohol issues, whatever. Somebody wrote it. Okay, but what else did they consider? There was a consideration that there could be another anthem for the state of Israel. Okay, so I'll teach you. I'll let you in on the secret tonight. Okay, take a look at source number one, and this was why it's very apropos, and we just study this one tonight. Did you know that coming in second place in the national anthem decision was Shir Hamalot that we sing every Shabbos and Yom Tov? Take a look. Source number one. You read about that? You heard about this? Okay, source number one. This is I forgot to put the name of the person here. This is not Rav Baumel. This is Rav Elchanan Samet. So I apologize, I didn't write the name at the end here. This is on a footnote of an essay that he wrote about Shir Hamalot. there are many paragraphs speaking of Shir Hamalot, but this is the one that we sing every Shabbos.
Who did you say
Uh,
wrote this?
This
again?
one right here, Elchanan Samet, okay, Rabbi
Elchanan.
Elchanan,
That's my new
Elchanen.
grandson's
Oh,
name.
there you go.
Elchanan.
Samet, Samet. He was a Rav at the Yeshiva at Har Etzion. And this is in a footnote that he has in his essay. And I had heard about this well before it was a footnote. I mean, maybe he wrote this way before I had heard this in other contexts as well. Rumor has it, he writes, that at the time of the establishment of the state of Israel, Rav Maimon Zichrono Livracha proposed that Psalm 126 be accepted as the national anthem. Just to give you a sense here, I'm even going to do it right now here. Rav Maimon. Okay, I'm just going to share with you. Okay. I want to here. So here, Huda Leib Maimon, right? So you see, he's watching my screen here. Okay, he was an Israeli rabbi, politician, leader of the religious Zionist movement. He was Israel's first minister of religions. So he grows up in Moldova. Or sorry, he was born in Moldova. He dies in 1962 in Tel Aviv. He founded the organization Mossad Rav Kook. So if you ever have one of those star Mossad Rav Kook. And he was part of the United Religious Front Party. Okay, so he was a very important rabbinic figure in the founding of the State of Israel, as I said, the first minister of religion. And he proposes, so the legend has it, that he proposes that Shir Hamalot, Psalm 126, should be the national anthem of the State of Israel. This finds expression in the Israeli rabbinate's enactment that this psalm be recited at the end of the evening and morning service on Yom Ha'atzmaut. If you look in even the Siddur we bought from Koren, they will put out here in a few days. They suggest that at the end of the service should be Shir Hamalot. Okay, and indeed there is none like this psalm, as it has been understood in our study to express the national experience connected with the establishment of the state in the days that followed until today. During the period of the establishment of the state, the words of the psalm, "We were like dreamers," and yes, what's his name? Yossi Klein Levi's book, "Like Dreamers." Okay, Shir Hayinu Kecholmim. Okay, we'll get to the psalm in just a second. Were fulfilled in us. There was great joy among all the Jews, and we said, "The Lord did great things for us." But immediately following its establishment, the newborn state with its 600,000 Jews was forced into a difficult war against the enemies that surrounded it. And as soon as that war was over, it faced a deep economic crisis, which led to a period of austerity and shortages. But the prayer of the returnees to Zion, to Zion, right? Shuva Hashem et Shiva Zion, right? Sorry, bring back, O Lord, our return like the streams in the south, was fulfilled. Great waves of immigration flooded the state shortly after its establishment and later as well. The economic situation gradually improved and the state advanced in all areas. Nevertheless, real life is complex and complicated, far removed from the hopes and dreams that everyone set on the state when it was created. Oh, that the days of smallness in which we are living. Lead here, Bella, we got a chair for you here. Why don't you want to pull this around over there? And that way
There's the chair, so you can see it. Okay, there's the chair.
I think it's right next to him.
Thanks so much.
Here we go. Okay, and then we'll pass this down. So there you go. Perfect. Okay. Sorry, there we go. The days of smallness in which we are living lead to the ascent and prosperity in those very areas that are so absent but necessary for the continued existence and development of the state of Israel. So again, there is a lot that the Jewish people have felt in terms of the establishment of Israel, state of Israel, in Psalm 126, that there's a deep connection. Yes, we will talk about, why do we say this every time with at Birkat HaMazon on a holiday, on Shabbat, or a festive occasion, whether it's a wedding or something of that sort, or a Brit Milah, a Milah or a Brit Milah. We could talk about that too. But I'm going to focus really on the connection that this psalm formed with the founders of the state of Israel. Again, so much so that I'm the first minister of religions, in the state of Israel. Rav Maimon wanted this to be, or at least suggested that this should be the national anthem, right? Or imagine that, taking the words of David HaMelech and making it into the national anthem of the state of Israel. That's not what happened. We're not revising history. We have a beautiful national anthem, but know that this came in second place, basically. And that's something to think about, and features very strong in the establishment of the rabbinate establishment of the tefillah by the rabbinate in Israel for Yom Ha'atzmaut. Sorry, let me just turn off the noises here. Okay, here we go. Sorry. Otherwise, it will never stop thinking. Okay. Psalm, source number 2, which is the Psalm itself. Let's read it. You've sung it millions of times in your lives, but let's read it very carefully. Shir HaMalot B'Shuv Hashem et Shivat Zion Hayinu Kecholmim. This is a line that we all can relate to, right? We all can feel it, right? It's a song of ascents. When B'Shuv Hashem, in the return, of God, at Shivat Zion, of the Shivat Zion. Now, that's going to be a term that we're going to have to talk a little bit more about. It's interesting here they wrote the fortunes of Zion. Shivat Zion you would think are the people who are the returnees to Zion, to Zion, to Yerushalayim. Hayinu kecholmim. We were like dreamers. Oh, you could never imagine it, right? We would come back to Israel. Right, that's what Shivat Zion probably means. Right, so our mouths, right? Sorry, the schok is like the joy, the like unbridled joy. It filled our mouth, right? How do they translate here? Filled with laughter, schok, right? Right. The schok was just, it filled our mouth. Right, Rina on our tongue was Rina. Rina is a word for joy, for gladness, right? And Rina also to sing out, correct? Right, sing. So we're singing out Az Yomer Vagoyim, and then they say amongst the nations, Higdil Hashem Lasot Im Eila. They say that among the nations that God has done great things for them, right? God has done great things for them. Right? Again, you can read first two lines and you go, oh yeah, this makes sense. This is the state of Israel, right? The world, the people who were there were so joyous. You all seen the video. Everyone was dancing around, and you understand this is very relatable. Higdil Hashem la'asot imanu hayinu smechim, right? That God did great things for us. Did great things for us. Hayinu smechim, we were rejoicing. Shuva now, first 3 psukim. It's like this unbridled joy. The dream that you could never imagine has come true. God has done such amazing things for us. Verse 4. Shuva Hashem et shiviteinu kafikim banegel. Here's a big change here. Let's see if we can identify it. I'm just going to translate. Hashem, return us. Et shiviteinu. Hashem, restore us. Hashem, again, they use fortunes. Those who are returning. Ka'afikim ba'negev, like the water streams in the south. Right? Afike mayim is a term that also comes up. Afikim, like the water streams in the south. Hazorim, and this one also touches people's hearts. Hazorim bedima, berina yitzoru. It's a great lesson for life. Those who sow with tears, right? You plant with tears. You work hard. You don't know what will be, but you put your all into life. God, or David HaMelech writes, "Berina yiktor," you will reap in song, right? When it all grows, you're gonna be joyous. How much went into the beginning of before Israel, right? And you think also that, and this really relates to something that Mati Friedman spoke about here over Shabbos. So he spoke about it mostly. I heard him speaking about it in. The fly just landed on me. In the context of going after me, the guy. With the Wiesels it was that parenting forum about Israel, and the founding of Israel was really the founders were really Ashkenazis. Let's talk about how a lot of the problems today at the sort of original sin, as he called it, was that there was, because very quickly a lot of the Sfaradim moved in because the other countries, the Arab nations, did not take well to the establishment of the state of Israel, and many from the surrounding Arab nations moved to Israel, the Jews. And if the sort of establishment of the state was by these Ashkenazim who didn't sort of bring the, kind of coddle in and bring the Sfaradim into, a lot of the establishment of the state and bring into even the positions of government. They had they kind of looked at the Sfaradim like all their customs and what's this they're doing. They're different. And they kind of had a little bit of a distance from them, which was, obviously in hindsight, a huge mistake, because you want to try to integrate society of different Jews with different backgrounds. That's whatever. He talked about how that led to a lot of the problems that we're seeing today in Israel. And one of the things that you think about, particularly with the Ashkenazi Jews who had descended from Europe, the tears and the despair that existed there, right? Azorim Bedima, but Barina Yiktzoru, the tears of what happened ended, that many of them moved to Israel, and that somehow the forces of the world aligned, that the state was, that other countries got on board, at least enough of them, that there was a vote that agreed to that partition plan. And then the same really story exists for Sfaradim, right? How many of them had if you were here at Shalashudis when Mati Free was speaking, right? About the Aleppo community, right? This was a community that's thousands of years. Suddenly it's gone, right? And many of them moved to Israel. And it's the same story. It's Azorim Bedima, Berina Yitzhak, right? It's a very sad ending, but you know what? Because of all the Aliyah to Eretz Yisrael, the state of Israel became a strong country with a more established economy and whatnot. So there's this idea of Hazor Medina that it ended with a song, though, right? The beauty of the state of Israel, it's flourishing, but it's a life lesson, right? Hazor Medina, we sometimes put in so much effort, we never know what's going to turn out, whether it's with our children, with our job, with our community, and we hope all towards the the back nine of our lives, right, to use a golf expression. We want to be able to see that the hard work, there was something to it, but we want to be able to have a song at the end of our life and see the reap the rewards of our hard work. The end of the psalm is very short, 6 psukim. Haloch yelech uvacho, no say meshech hazara, bo yavo verina, no say alumotav. That though we walk along uvacho while we cry, no say meshech hazara, right? We are carrying the bag of seeds, right? In which we're planting and we're planting and we're planting. Bo yavo verina, there he shall come back with joy. No say alumotav, and we'll be carrying the sheaves, like all the things that we've reaped. What's so different about the first 3 psukim versus the last 3 psukim? There's a huge difference. There is a similar theme, but there's a big difference in terms of how these first 3 and the last 3 are written.
Well, there's a pain. There's a pain.
There's a pain.
Yeah.
The last.
So what's the difference? You're right there, Nora, right? What's the difference? The first 3 sounds like we're back.
Well, it's a dream. Dream come true.
The dream come true.
Dream realized, right?
Right. It's a dream that's realized suddenly, and we're talking about God, what God did for us. Suddenly, verse 4, Shuva Hashem, we're pleading directly to God to bring us back. What do you mean? We were back. 3 verses ago, we were back already. Why are we diving to Hashem? Shuva Hashem et shiviteinu kafikim hanekef. You just told me, V'shuv Hashem et shivat Zion hayinu kecholmim. I was plotting because I thought I'd never see the day, and now the day has come. And now we're davening again for the same thing. What's going on? We already lived the dream. Why are you davening again about basically the dream? Oh yeah, Zorim Bedima, as Nora said. It sounds like a little sadness here. right? It's almost like a hopeful, don't worry, the hard work will pay off. What do you mean? What do you mean? We just had a vote. The United Nations just passed it. We're back. We're back. 2,000 years, we're back. What's going on? Yeah, Barbara, yeah.
I'm looking, because I don't know Hebrew,
Yeah.
but I'm looking at the English translation of the first three, and it's future tense, when the Lord restores. Our
B'shuv
mouths
Hashem.
shall be filled with laughter. Then they shall say among the nations. So are we still in the dream? In the act of dreaming?
Right. Yeah, you're correct. Right. B'shuv Hashem, when he returns at Shivat Zion, we will be like dreamers.
But sometimes.
I don't know.
sometimes it don't mean anything.
Well, right, that's what I'm saying.
But-
That's what I said. I don't know
right.
the Hebrew.
But right, even the second part, Az Yimale, then our mouth will be full, right? Az Yom Vago, then they will say amongst the nations, 100%. But if that's the case, right? Unless you're saying maybe that's what maybe it's a good explanation, right? So you have here, this is the dream, and then we daven for the dream, right? Okay, that's very cool. Very well could be. Very well could be.
Rabbi, could it also be,
Go
I'm thinking
ahead.
about David HaMelech, who was an Ish Milchama, right? He was a man of war.
Right.
So he conquered a lot of Israel, but yet he couldn't build Yerushalayim. He couldn't build the Beit HaMikdash that he wanted to. So perhaps that was part of the dream, that he was able to do all these things, but yet that final piece he couldn't get to.
Right. Very good. I like that you're bringing it back to David HaMelech. I have to think about the original context of this all. So, yeah, there were certain, you could even just talk about how David HaMelech, he fought one battle, but then there was another battle to fight. One problem and another problem, right? So life is not so simple always that it's just one, moment of hurrah, and then we're done. Very good. Excellent. So now what I want to do is I want to take a look at three explanations that you could legitimately have, and perhaps one of them will actually fit with what you said, Barbara, for how to understand this psalm, especially given the change at the beginning when we were talking about God and then we were talking to God. Okay. Take a look at source number 3. Oh, I see. I really forgot. I was in such a rush today because I didn't have a chance last night with a dinner to prepare this. All the rest of these sources that are unmarked are by Rabbi Avi Bauman. I apologize. He wrote this again. This is what he wrote. So you can find these essays on the Shivat Har Etzion website, and he wrote again essays on various chapters of Psalms. And this is his. So I apologize. I did not write it on the sheet. It's a mistake. It should be there. And we've read his material in the past. He's very thoughtful in terms of his analysis. So take a look at source number 3. For years, we have sung various tunes to the Shir HaMalot prior to reciting Birkat HaMazon. And I would venture to say that it's one of the few psalms that a decent percentage of Jews. I'm not saying a number because not everyone remembers everything by heart, but a number of people remember this one by heart. Right? The content and the nature of the psalm, however, is quite obscure to say the least. In the opening lines, we encountered a difficulty. When God restored, question mark, here's that tense question, right? The Shivat Zion, we are joyous. Restore our Shivitenu, oh God, like water courses of the Negev. That's from from the first in verse 4. Is this prayer a praise for the past event, a plea for the future? Who or what is the term Shivat Zion? I said it means, the returnees of Zion. That's not correct, though. But we have to take everything with a grain of salt here. Take a look at the next source. On the one hand, the psalm reflects a parallel relationship between paragraph A and B. And again, A being A was the beginning of those first 3 verses, and B being the last 3 verses, right? Where we were talking about God, then to God. Okay. For example, verse 1 uses the term Shivat Zion, while verse 4, which is the first part of the second half, reminds us of it with the word Shivitenu. So you have a little bit of parallel here. Watch, he's going to draw a literary parallel here. Both verses 1 and 4 use a metaphor to demonstrate their point. Finally, both verses 2 and 5 the second verse of each part, are connected with the word rina. Both use the word joy, same word. It would seem that the psalm follows a poetic literary structure of ABC, ABC, meaning the second half of the psalm reinforces the first half in a very similar pattern. However, a closer inspection of the literary features reveals that the two halves do not really correspond at all. While verses 1 to 3 indicate the psalm is about a spiritual or historical event, the restoring of Shivat Zion, verses 4 to 6, with their agricultural motifs, by the way, very strong in the agriculture. We're talking about the bundles and the sheaves, and we're talking about planting with tears and reaping with song. It's agriculture left and right. Talking about agricultural metaphors. Give the impression that it was written by farmers asking for rain, which is a huge need in the land of Israel, something that we daven for in a very serious way in our regular tefillot. Even to this very day, we have a very serious prayer on Shmini Atzeret called Tefillah Geshem. Right, the fate of the Jewish people is on the line historically. Now, because of the water technology pioneered by Israel, it's not as dire that there's a drought in Israel. But you go back in time, not that long ago, a drought was disastrous. And you go back way in time, a drought was deadly in Israel, because if there was no water, there are no crops, and by the time you get to some point in the spring, you're now in huge trouble because there's not enough food and water for the people that live in this area. And so they instituted fasts. The whole Masechet Ta'anit in the Mishnah and the Gemara, all about what happened when there was no rain at a certain point. And the rabbis would institute fasts, and they would have public prayer in the middle of the street. They talk about and this happened because droughts happened. So it talks about what did the Jews do in those circumstances. So this sounds like a prayer from the farmers, right? I'm working hard, I plant. What happens if there's no rain? If there's no rain, I'm not going to reap anything. So the prayer is, Hazorim B'dima, you worked hard, you cried, you davened to Hashem, please let it be. Hopefully, Barina Yitzor, we daven that we should be able to be joyous in song when we reap the produce. So additionally, he says here, Rabbi Baumel, when analyzing the voice the author uses to speak to God, we will notice the first part in relating to God speaks of him, of God. When God returned the Shivat Zion, we were like dreamers. Then there shall be laughter and joy. Verse 4 begins by the poet turning to God, pleading, return us, O God. And we pointed this out a moment ago. How, then, can we harmonize the two distinct units in the psalm? Is the author a spiritual person or a farmer? Right? Is he writing about God or to God? So we're going to see three potential ways of looking at this. 5, 6, and 7. Here again, all Rabbi Baumel lays out three potential paths.
Can it be both?
Both that it's the farmer and someone who sees things more broadly, more globally as like a spiritual returning to Zion. That's what you're suggesting. Could be.
Way to God, about God, and to God.
Absolutely. So actually, this is going to be his third suggestion is going to be what you just suggested. Hold on. Edna wrote something here in the chat. Could the first part relate to a spiritual return, the second to a physical reinstatement? Okay, that's kind of what Nora was saying a moment ago. Yeah, very good. Yes. So this is going to be a third suggestion. Yes. Take a look at A, B, and then C, 5, 6, and 7. Number one, you could say it's the following. The Psalm focuses on a great historical event, the returning of Shivat Zion to Israel. And we'll look at Rashi in a moment. This is the opinion of Rashi and the Malbim. With this approach, the second half of the psalm must then be interpreted on a figurative note, right? Reaping here is not literal in the agricultural sense. Sowing is not literally planting in the agricultural sense. It's a metaphor for this big historical event that has happened. The return to Israel of people who have perhaps been exiled. Okay, we'll take a look at that in a moment. B, what's another suggestion we could have here? The psalm is mainly an agricultural one. focusing on the people witnessing a rebirth in the crops from God, meaning it's all agriculture. We ask for rain to rush down the mountains through the water courses in the desert. How then do we understand the first part of the song? If that's really true, how do we understand the first part about the Shivat Zion? That's the one question you have to deal with in a major way. If you're going to take that approach, that it's all agricultural, it's very practical in that sense. This is essentially the prayer of a farmer. Lastly, a combination, right, is what Edna and Nora have suggested. The first half indeed refers to a historical event, while the second half relates to the physical agricultural issue. Now, if you do go down that road, poetry has to come together, though. We would then have to explain both halves and attempt to synthesize the two. Why does this large event relate to this important but yearly event, which is that you need rain and you're davening that you want the agriculture, there should be agricultural success in your country, in your neighborhood, in your community.
This is so much into that. I mean, I think of Shema, right? I mean, you're part of the rain that we get is a reflection of our
Collective behavior, essentially.
Yeah.
Right.
And so it's a spiritual. I mean, rain is concrete, and watering crops is all concrete.
Mhm.
But there's a spiritual level to that relationship.
So so the question I want us to answer in this context, following up on what you're saying, is, well, then why is it that that there's this Shivat Zion? Who's returning to Zion? Right. I mean, you're saying is right, but who's returning to Zion? Right? There sounds like there's some sort of historical event going on here, and then there's a second part of this. So if you're going to take the agricultural, lane alone, your question is going to be, as he points out here, how do I explain the beginning in a metaphorical sense that relates to agriculture? If it's talking about a historical event, I have to explain the agriculture at the end. That's number one. If you take the third approach, that it's a little bit of both, so you have to explain how the two connect. Yes, on a simple level, the last part is about agriculture. The beginning part is about some sort of historical event. How do I connect the two? Why are they in the same psalm? Make them two different psalms. An agricultural psalm and a psalm about this historical event that David HaMelech sees coming down the pike, that he's reflecting upon. Maybe it's written later by someone other, authors. We talked about Tehillim is an amalgam. There are other authors as well. Let's explore this. Let's take a look at Rashi now. Rashi in his commentary on the psalm, source number 8, and this really explores the first approach, that it's all talking about some incredible historical event. So Rashi writes, we have all the comments here actually of Rashi as well. V'shuv Hashem et Shivat Zion. So the black, the bolded text is the words from the psalm, and the non-bolded are Rashi's words. So Migalut Bavel Hayinu Kecholmim. So David HaMelech is here some sort of prophetic statement that he's making here, that one day when God returns the Jews from the Babylonian exile, right? They were, after the first temple was destroyed, the Jews were exiled to Bavel for the most part. There might have been some Jews who remained behind. And ultimately they were returned at a certain point, we'll talk about in a second. Well, let's just throw out there. Who returned them? Anyone know? So the way here's how it goes. The Babylonians, what was that? Yeah, Cyrus, King Cyrus, was the Persian king. The Babylonians were, to use a Chad Gadya term, basically, the Babylonians were slaughtered by the Persians, and then the Persians had the first king, Darius, Daryavesh, and then there was Achashverosh, and then after Achashverosh came Cyrus, and Cyrus was the one who sent the Jews back. Now the Jews were under control of the Persian kingdom, but he said, "Go ahead and rebuild your temple." And we have historical record of this. He was very proud of it, and there's a archaeological finding they had the Cyrus cylinder, and he writes about how he was the one, not God, how he was the one who brought back the temple for the Jews. He takes great credit for that. I have a book at home, a picture of that finding that they made, that the archaeologists found. Anyways, so this is what we're talking about according to Rashi. Ka'afikim ba'negev, what do we make of that? Ka'afikim ba'negev, right? These streams of water in the south. Like, as I'll just read it in English here, like rivulets in arid land, which moisten it. So shall we be moistened, freshened when you return us from our captivity. For those who sow in arid land with tears, worrying that it will not grow, right? Here we are with some little small little whatever. We grew, incredible, wow, right? When they are directed into that, right? When the streams go the right way, it all works out beautiful. Okay, so again, it's really talking. Rashi thinks about the return to Bavel. It's not going to be simple, and that like that we'll blossom from there. Lastly, he will go along weeping, etc. So do Israel in exile. Right? We sow, are in acts of tzedakah in tears. So do Israel in exile. So charity in tears. Right? And by the way, in the Hebrew here, they didn't translate this accurately. Tzedakah b'dima, right? We still are connected to God even in exile. I think about all the years, by the way, after the second Beit HaMikdash was destroyed until 1948. The Jews didn't control the land of Israel. Nonetheless, the Jewish people kept their faith, right, as a in a whole. Well, we continued before Kadosh Baruch Hu to do acts of righteousness. We didn't give up. Bedima, the galut, in our tears and in exile. How many tragedies happened in the exile for years and years, right? And there was no enough. They felt like there was no place to go. And run from this country, they kick us out, or that country, they kick the Jews out. Uvarina yiksarush, right? And we will reap, we'll reap in song. When they will be, God will pay their reward in the future, right? For keeping the faith through all the years, God will reward them in kind. So Rashi takes takes an approach about this is the return of the Jews from the Babylonian exile. Now, David HaMelech lived well before they were exiled. The Beit HaMikdash wasn't even built when David HaMelech lived. Nonetheless, he sees that there will be writing on the wall that one day the Jews won't be in Israel, things won't go well, but don't worry, God will bring you back. Take a look at source number 9. Again, Rabbi Baumel here writing, in reflecting about this Rashi kind of approach. He quotes here from Professor Efrati, who agrees with Rashi's claim that the Shivat Zion refers to specific people. Upon the destruction of the first temple in 586 BCE, the Jews were banished from Zion, thinking, what? They would never return. They would never return. This did not prevent them from yearning, from praying, and hoping for the day that they would finally return to Zion. In 538, their dream came true. King Cyrus allowed these longers for Zion to return to their land. He subsequently gave them permission to rebuild the Beit HaMikdash in 516. Led spiritually by Haggai and Zechariah, who are prophets, their books in Tanakh, Haggai and Zechariah, and politically they were led by Zerubbabel. The first group of Jews, of exiled Jews, arrived back on the soil of their homeland, ready to begin life anew. It is at this time, Efrati claims, that the psalm was written. The first paragraph fits perfectly. He thanks God for returning them to Shivat Zion, those who long to return to Zion, to Yerushalayim, something they would have thought only to be a dream a few years ago. Right? Remember, they weren't in control. Foreign king had to say, you know what, I like you guys, you Jews, which is not something that they had heard. Now, Nebuchadnezzar wasn't exactly the king of the Babylonians, wasn't exactly a big fan. Ahasuerus was out to lunch. He's being bribed this way and that way. He didn't care about Jews. He cared about his bottom line, right? Anyways, take a look here. Sorry, let's continue here where we were. Then, referring to the stage he is in at present, their mouths will be filled with laughter and our tongues joy. They are so fortunate that the surrounding nations have come to realize the greatness that God has bestowed upon them, his people. They have realized this fact as well. The author of this psalm spends one half praising God and thanking him for all that had transpired, including the ability to rebuild the Beit HaMikdash, a goal which was only dreamed about in the past. How, though, do we understand the second half, which seems to ask for salvation from God? It uses agricultural terminology to do so. If you're going to take this approach like Rashi, what do you do with the farming references? Why? Why the farming references?
You can't even live without food.
So Efrati explains that while life was starting to look up, there were still, turn the page, two fundamental issues which had to be confronted. Think about 1948. It's great, they voted, it's great, we have a state. 5 seconds later, what happened?
A war.
They're declaring war on the state of Israel. Right? There were issues to be confronted. This is the story of Israel, right? First, the amount of Jews who returned to Israel in a very small percentage of the Jewish community. Same story, right? It wasn't suddenly all the Jews are in the world, suddenly, oh, there's a state of Israel, we're all running to the state of Israel. It's not what happened. It's not what happened at all. Most of them were scattered throughout the Persian Empire. Most of the Jews were living in Arab countries at that time. Yes, there are some in America. Of course, there were, still some a little bit remnants in Europe. They weren't living in Israel. They weren't living in Israel. Second, while Jews had a certain sense of autonomy, they appointed leader Zerubbabel. Okay, does that sound familiar by the way to anybody? Okay, it's Bavel, Zerubbabel. Yeah. Okay, you go back and look at the Maus. Yeah, there you go. He was the political leader of the Jewish people at the time. While stemming from a Davidic dynasty, did not achieve total sovereignty. Rather, the control still rested on the Persian Empire. They were in control. This was indeed not the eschatological vision of the Jewish people living freely in their homeland. Yeah, we have a Beit HaMikdash, but the guy who's really in charge, he has no care about what our religion is, how we worship in this base. It's nice that he gives us the space at least, but at the end of the day, we're not in control. It's one of the lines in the Gemara at the end of the Purim story. The Gemara asked the question, why don't we say Hallel on Purim? We don't say Hallel. Fascinating. We don't say Hallel on Purim. Why don't we say Hallel on Purim? So one of the answers, according to Rava, is because at the end of the story, who's still in control? Achashverosh is still in control. Much as Mordechai has been elevated, Achashverosh is still in control. And since he's in control, it's not a real joy. Because who knows what the next day, the story ends. We don't know what happened the next day after the Purim story ended. Maybe some other guy bribed him and said, hi, I have $1 million for you. And who knows? At the end of the day, we weren't in control. So continuing here, the author of the psalm, sensitive to all these these deficiencies, directs the second half of the psalm to God in a plea to restore Jerusalem to all its glory, to help bring a complete revival of Jewish life, kingship, and religion. One thing interfered with this goal: the Persian Empire. Right? They were in the way. Now they gave us the space, but was right a little bit also like the founding of the state of Israel. Who gave us the space? At the end of the day, at the beginning, first of all, the British were in charge. And then the United Nations had to vote. Okay, then finally they said, okay, you take it from there. And then we were at war. We didn't really have control yet. Having just bestowed all these gracious rights to the Jews, for them to hear the songs of rebellion, revolution, and war would be catastrophic. But we're going to let go. Yeah. Thank you so much. Thank you so much for this land now. Thank you, Cyrus. And get off my land. Get off my property. This is my property. Yeah, you should feel lucky that I'm even letting you step on this land. The author instead opts for a more hidden message in his quest for absolute independence, right? Using commonly known metaphors, right? Using the farming metaphors found in the prophetic book of Yirmiyahu and Yechezkel, he sends out a coded message for all to pray for the complete redemption. In describing the exile, Yirmiyahu says, the prophet of doom, right? Before the destruction of the first Beit HaMikdash, he says, weep and cry as you walk away. When you're leaving Israel, he's perhaps the exiting from Israel, the destruction. Yirmiyahu is the person who authored Eicha. So as you're leaving, he says, weep and cry as you walk away. Okay? Imagery that appears here about weeping and crying in our psalm. Alternatively, Yechezkel describes redemption the following way. What's redemption? He then took some of the seed of the land and planted it in a fertile land. He planted it and set it like a willow beside abundant waters. It was not an uncommon metaphor, you see, in Tanakh, to speak in agricultural terms, because it makes sense. That was their main source of, it would be like using business terminology today, or, for them, it was an agrarian society. This was how people spoke. They probably used agricultural metaphors. So here's a metaphor, right? If you reap in tears, right, there's still a lot of work to do. If you sow in tears, you reap in song. So we're using agriculture. The message in its time was clear and conclusive, but we pay tribute and praise God for the beginning of the redemption. Reshit smichat geulatenu, right? And though we have the ability to laugh, true, complete joy will only come with a final salvation. Just as we witnessed the lamented realization of Yirmiyahu's prophecy of crying as we walked into exile, so too we hope and pray that the prophecy of Yechezkel of rebirth, revitalization, replanting a new willow, one which will be able to thrive and flourish in abundant waters, will be fulfilled. Meaning all the challenges and the troubles will be overcome, that the war can be won, that, by the way, and we mentioned it before, my mom moved to Israel, my grandparents, on my mom's side moved to Israel. My mom was born in 1952 in Netanya. The beginning of the state of Israel was, she describes it, not so simple. Not so simple. The education system, again, the economy was in tatters. If you ever watch, he just passed away. Played Fiddler on the Fortepiano. What was his name? Chaim Topol. He played another movie, Salach Shabbati. If you haven't seen it, it's worth watching. And Lo Rotzim Shikun Rotzim Abara. He's using the reverse. They lived in huts. A lot of the Jews, in the very, very beginning. Right. Right. So that's what there was the joke in this is that they wanted to be able to. They felt like the Israeli government would only listen if they would protest. Whatever they were. Whatever they didn't want, that they would actually give them. So they would say, "Lo rotzim shikun rotzim ma'abar," or something. I don't know. They were protesting. I don't know. You have to watch. It's been a while since I watched the movie. Anyways, it's a great film. But it shows you the beginnings of Israel. It wasn't simple. It wasn't simple. And yes, there were ma'abarot, and in the film they portray that they were just empty, and nobody's feeling them. They built them nicely. They're right over there, and we're in the hut and whatever. It's a great film.
Food was ration.
Food was ration. It was not so simple. It was not simple. We remember the stories of the pictures of everyone dancing and it was not so simple at all. Really, it's a miracle after the miracle that it thrived. So you kind of see that here a little bit, and that's why when you read this, you can't help but, if you're literally, by the way, the agriculture, to build up the farmlands, right, after the war was over, right. That was a literal agriculture. So there were all these challenges. That's why I think this resonates so deeply with the founding of the state of Israel. Let's look at source number 10. What about maybe taking the second approach? Maybe this is all a farmer. So while Professor Efrati defines the phrase Shivat Zion on a historical plane, and is therefore forced to reinterpret the second half of the psalm along metaphorical lines, Yechezkel Kaufman, there's another scholar, takes the opposite approach. This psalm has nothing to do with the period of the Second Temple. In fact, it is not even referring to a historical event. The psalm should be understood as it is read, a prayer for rain and sustenance. In this light, or in this approach, the reading of the second half of the psalm is more literal. That's easy. Return our land to its glory, the land flowing with milk and honey. At this point, the farmer lays his seed crying, but one day, with your help, God, he will reap rejoicing. However, so the second half is easy. What do we do with the first half according to this approach? We are confronted with the first half of the psalm, which has no allusions to agricultural nomenclature. There's no agriculture there, no farming, references. We are forced to read into the phrase Shivat Zion as not reflecting any historical aspect. There's no return to Zion here. This is rather difficult to accept for two reasons. First, if we interpret the first half as a praise for the rain they received, it kind of directly contradicts the latter half, If they got the rain, now they're davening for more rain. If that's a metaphor for rain, the Shivat Zion, the rains are returning to Zion. Well, they got it already. Well, then why are you davening in the second half for rain? It's a little bit complicated. So therefore, secondly, it says here, why would there be a call? Why would this be cause for other nations to say, right? The other nations say, as Yomru Hagoyim, Higdil Hashem, wow, look what God has done for them. This is not so historical that it rained. You have to say something more than that. So he doesn't like the second version. I think it's hard to look at this as only a farmer saying this. He likes this third approach, which is again what Nora and Edna had already started to suggest before. Our final option is to synthesize the two ideas he writes. This is source 11. Or rather, to accept each half of the psalm as a unique means in reflecting the sign of the times. The psalm was written during a great historical time period, one where the hand of God was readily apparent in certain ways, but hidden in others. Again, one can say the same about the founding of the state of Israel. We felt that the hand of God was guiding in that moment in a way that we maybe didn't in other moments in our lives, right? The author acknowledges the miraculous scene, but also prays and hopes for total salvation. This psalm, much like its title, reflects different aspects of praise and different approaches for future redemption. For some, redemption comes through kingship and the reestablishment of the Beit HaMikdash. For others, a more mundane method is required to retrieve the people. Through a resuscitation of the agricultural situation, the Jews themselves will return to Zion like water courses in the deserts, right? So in the terrible times agriculturally, that resuscitation also is a if you go back to even verse 4, we say Shuva Hashem et Shivitenu. It's almost like a repetition. God, bring us back like the streams in the south, like the water courses in the desert. So it's a different kind of redemption, a different way to feel a redemption. What the author creates is a cyclical pattern. The redemption is set in motion. God reveals himself, albeit in a limited way. For some people, that salvation is enough to uproot themselves from their complacent society and make the journey, the Ma'alah, to Israel. The majority waits in anticipation for the final redemption or for a more practical incentive to join their brethren. Without the preponderance of Jews, however, the country does not repopulate. The nation remains weak. So, what is he saying here? There's a cyclical nature to these things. Redemption is set into motion, like Rabbi Shacker said when he spoke. Redemption is not linear. It doesn't work like that. That's Yetziat Mitzrayim. Safety, Salti, Galti, Blakachti. 1, 2, 3, 4, and we're good, we're done, we're off. That's not redemption in real life. Redemption in real life, as he spoke about, is the medrash about the 4 cups, about the life of Yosef. It's complicated. There's ups, there's downs, there's jail, there's out, there's family returns. That's ugly. That's a difficult scene. Life is not so simple. And in some ways, it's cyclical, as he's saying here, right? It's set into motion by God. He gives a revelation in some way, And for some people, that they uproot themselves from their complacency and make the journey, the Ma'alah to Israel. Right? Many Jews at that point, they saw the founding of the state. It was the war. Things came, wow. When was the biggest wave of immigration to Israel? Obviously, it was at the beginning. Right? But when? Towards the beginning. Where were they coming from?
In the originally.
Well, I was saying, like, that's in 1949, Well, that was after the war. But where were they coming from? Right. And they didn't go to, let's say, America when the Jews in those countries were being oppressed and essentially pushed out the door. This is, say the years out the establishment of the state and the year or two, afterwards. Like, I don't know when, like, for example, when did your family?
In the early 1900s.
Oh, you were even before. So America.
They didn't.
So when did you have relatives back, in Syria?
Oh,
When
mine all came that earliest part of the.
Oh, they were all there.
But
there were many people left until the 70s.
Right, there's a slow trickle, but
Yeah.
the biggest wave was really after like, oh, the Jewish people were established now. There was a state and there was a war that okay, we have a country. And then people came in, and Moti Friedman was talking about this actually on Shabbos, that gathering, a small gathering, that's when a lot of the Mizrahi Jews moved in. And this was a big wave. Same thing, right? Oh, there's a little moment, and suddenly a lot of Jews wanted to make the journey. But okay. And then through the years, of course, many Jews have joined, but the majority waits in anticipation for the final redemption. There's still many Jews, all of us included, who haven't made that return to Israel yet. The majority of wait for Israel for final redemption, or for more practical incentive to join their brethren. Without the preponderance of Jews, however, the country does not repopulate. The nation remains weak. Go back to the prayer, by the way, we say every week for the state of Israel. What does it say? Right? We daven in the second paragraph, I think, that God should gather in all the Jews, right? Me'arba kanfo ta'aretz, right? That even on when that prayer was written, we understood that in order for that full redemption to be, it's really that the return for the Jewish people in totality, and so there's more, right? It's redemption was set into motion, but the second part talks about that there's still practical issues, right? There's difficulty, and there's we're crying, as we reap, as we sow, and we reap, and we hope to reap as we sing. It's life's not easy. It's not like, oh, the state and done, we're good. According to this approach, the prayer begins with a review of the miracles they had seen before their very eyes. Something about which everyone had dreamed began to emerge. Even the Gentiles praised the remarkable rebirth, and yet the author expresses neither God nor the people had completed the cycle, nor the people had completed the circle. Perhaps if God helped us out, he prays, there was a little physical incentive, the majority would rush in like water courses in the desert. Right? If everything is better, then the streams, and then the Kafik and Banegev, everyone will return, like the water courses in the desert that keep things alive there and whatnot. And so you could read it as this is a combination, right? It could be literally agricultural things that are necessary, right? There's success of the financial success, the economic success of Israel, historically speaking, and more modern times, is still up in the air, right? Even when God brings you back. Again, when he brought us back at the beginning of the second Beit HaMikdash, read the Bible, read Tanakh. If you read the book of Ezra, who was at the beginning of the Second Temple period, you will know that most Jews did not return to Israel when the second Beit HaMikdash was built. They did not return. They had too many questions. And it's the momentum of life. We live here in Bavel. We live in Babylonia. This is where we live. Our kids go to school here. Most Jews did not go back. Initially, they did not go back. There always, at that point, remained a Jewish community in Bavel. Jews did not leave. And correct. Adayom Hazeh, essentially, like, we have a state of Israel now, right? And the Jewish community is not all moved back to the state, does not move back to our homeland. And it's not a criticism. I'm sitting here. I'm also sitting here, right? It's not a criticism. It's just a description of fact. And so there's more yet to come. But the more that, that the state of Israel succeeds, you see the more that, the more Jews continue to return. The economic success today of Israel is huge in allowing Aliyah to flourish. How many of us, maybe even at this table here, right, have someone who has a job in Israel? They're able to, it's because of economic situations. They're able to, because they had a comfortable economic situation, they were able to move. They had a job that was lined up. They were able to move into some tech job, into a computer programming job. I'll tell you, that's recorded. No, it's because my brother-in-law and sister, right, who are very much about to make Aliyah. He moved. My brother-in-law moves into a profession after college of computers because he knew they wanted to make Aliyah, and so he went to one of these boot camp programs, computer programming, and now he's got a few jobs here, and now they're gonna make Aliyah. They kind of set themselves up for that because Israel has a certain economy that attracts people in. So the story is that it's not over, right? Shir HaMa'alot is about it's not over, right? God brought us back, but there's more to daven for, right? Shuva Hashem et shivitenu. There's more who didn't come back yet. And that's partly about the success of the financial success, the economic success, the agricultural success of Israel, right? Of the land of Israel. And so this psalm rings true, not just in the times of the return to after for the beginning of the second Beit HaMikdash period, and it rings true in 1948 when Rav Maimon is suggesting maybe this is the national anthem, right? This is the beginnings of the journey, but it's a Reishit Tzmichat Kulatenu. It's the beginnings of the flowering of our redemption, but it's not. This is not the end of the story. There is more to daven for. There's more to daven for. And I'll end with one last point. Pivoting a little bit. We say this at the end of before benching on holidays, Shabbos. Why do you think we should do that? It's everything we talked about here. What does it to do with Shabbos, Yom Tov? What does that have to do with anything here? Anything about anything? What does it have to do with? So when we're sitting at the Shabbos table, what do we reflect upon most of the time? Family, the week that was, right? The week that hopefully will be next week, right? There is an appreciation of the moment that we have, right? That God has brought us to where we are right now. We have Shabbos, and it's really relaxing, and we're able to be together, family, friends, etc. But we have needs, right? We appreciate what we have, but Shabbos is about rejuvenating ourselves. So even a Chag is about rejuvenating ourselves. About what are the goals for next week, and they shouldn't we're not supposed to talk about details about the business thing, but about what do I want for myself, what do I want for my family, what do I want for my community, and there's an acknowledgement of God's great hand in history that Rabbi Malher writes this. You don't have it on your sheet. At the same time, we have plea for the final redemption when we are all of us will indeed reap with joy, right? So there's we appreciate what we have, Shabbos, what we had this week. But there's also this idea about there's more to come. There's more to come. Life's journey isn't over. It's a moment where we are able to pause and turn to Hashem and say, help us as we go forward, after Shabbos and whatnot, that we should be able to succeed in reaping joy, from all of our work that is to come. So that's perhaps one of the reasons. There could be other reasons why this became popular to say. It's a very uplifting, very positive psalm, which makes sense to say on a happy day. On non-joyous days, we actually say a different paragraph. I don't, because I just never have the time. But there's a different psalm which we will study called Al Naharot Bavel, being on the river, so in Babylon, which is talks about the longing of returning to Israel. Here we're talking about the returning. They're talking about the longing. That's what the famous words in the song we sing at the wedding, right? My brain's not working. What is it? The singing of Imesh Kachech. Imesh Kachech. I'm going back to the lines in my head by that letting. Imesh Kachech Yerushalayim Tishkach Yemini Tidbak Lishoni. That's all from that psalm, which is all about if I forget Jerusalem, and it's all really talking about being in exile. So perhaps we'll study that not next week, but maybe another time. But hopefully this gives us some appreciation for this we say every week, but also Yom Ha'atzmaut, where this is part of the formal tefillah that was established by the Rabbanut. So say it before you bench on Yom Ha'atzmaut. And I wish everybody in anticipation a Chag Sameach, and we continue to see the flourishing of the state of Israel. The best is yet to come in that sense.